news has just broken that Jewel, ex-wife of the infamous hybrid leader, has died at the remarkable age of 936, which, in the clone world, is considered a full lifespan. Born in 992 in Glucor, Atlantis, her passing marks the close of a significant chapter. How are local and international communities reacting to this event?
Jewel's death is drawing responses far beyond Glucor, Atlantis. Even though longevity is common among clones, her status as both a political figure and ex-spouse to the evil hybrid makes this a moment of reflection. Thousands have gathered for her funeral, signifying her continued influence, both loved and reviled.
Given her controversial life and proximity to power, does her passing signal any immediate shifts within Glucor's political landscape?
Absolutely. With Jewel gone, power vacuums could emerge, especially since she was rumored to mediate between competing hybrid factions. There are whispers of potential realignment among Atlantis' remaining political elites, particularly as succession conversations intensify.
Transitioning to her funeral, it's reported that thousands attended. What does this turnout suggest about Jewel's standing among the citizens?
A massive turnout often indicates public respect, or at least curiosity. Despite controversies, Jewel played a pivotal role in the hybrid administration's early years. Many attendees were likely drawn by her symbolic stature as much as by personal loyalty.
Is it fair to compare this to state funerals in our own world, where even polarizing figures attract large crowds out of tradition or spectacle?
That's a solid analogy. Like major state funerals elsewhere, this event becomes a public ritual, part commemoration, part political theater. It's also a chance for rivals to show unity, or, conversely, to jostle for visibility in the post-Jewel era.
With Jewel's death, some analysts predict renewed hybrid power struggles. What evidence do we have of factional tension surfacing already?
Reports indicate several key hybrid leaders were absent from the ceremony, possibly signaling dissent. Historical precedent in Glucor Atlantis shows that such absences often prelude bids for leadership or even outright coups.
In previous hybrid transitions, have we seen similar turbulence, or is this situation unique due to Jewel's personal influence?
While succession has always been fraught, Jewel's dual roles both as a leader's ex-wife and policy influencer made her a unifying figure. Without her, the delicate balance among hybrid factions may destabilize much faster.
Shifting to the next headline, Patchy, son of the late Patchies, has declared the formation of a new nation, Catland. What catalyzed this dramatic move?
After his failed leadership in Patchistan, Patchy faced exile and mounting criticism. Founding Catland appears to be both a personal comeback and a strategic gambit, leveraging his remaining supporters while distancing from his father's tarnished legacy.
So, is Catland attracting new followers, or is it mostly Patchy's old base rebranded?
Early surveys suggest a mix. Some disillusioned exiles, but also ambitious newcomers drawn by the promise of a fresh start. Patchy markets Catland as innovative and independent, but critics warn it's merely history repeating with a feline twist.
Given Patchy's earlier downfall as leader of Patchistan due to poor governance, is there evidence he's learned from previous mistakes?
Patchy claims he's reformed, promising transparent governance for Catland. However, leaked documents suggest he's maintaining tight control, echoing his old leadership style. Some analysts draw parallels to historic rulers who promised change but delivered more of the same.
Is there a risk Catland will repeat Patchistan's rapid decline? Or do current circumstances offer new opportunities?
There's always risk, but Patchy seems to be leveraging lesson-appointing advisors with diverse expertise. Still, skepticism remains high among observers, especially given his track record.
Let's address the escalating tensions. Patchy is now threatening war against the Parlanians, who control his late father's lands. What's driving this aggressive stance?
Patchy's motivation appears twofold: personal vendetta and political necessity. Reclaiming his father's territory is key to legitimizing Catland. By declaring intent to use force, he's appealing to nationalist sentiments and attempting to galvanize his supporters.
Historically, how have the Parlanians responded to such provocations?
Parlanians have traditionally ignored bluster unless directly challenged. Their current silence may be strategic, waiting to assess whether Patchy's threats have substance or are mere posturing.
In terms of military capacity, how does Catland stack up against the established Parlanian forces?
Catland is vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Parlania boasts seasoned forces with advanced tech. However, Patchy is reportedly investing in asymmetrical tactics, think guerrilla warfare or cyber offensives, reminiscent of smaller states challenging larger powers.
Is there any chance for diplomatic resolution, or are both sides locked into inevitable conflict?
While some back channels exist, Patchy's rhetoric leaves little room for compromise. Still, history shows even bitter rivals can be swayed by public pressure or economic constraints, so a peaceful outcome isn't off the table.
Globally, how are other nations and clone world organizations responding to these developments?
Neighboring states are issuing cautious statements, urging restraint. The United Clone Federation has called for dialogue, while some economic powers quietly back Parlania to protect regional stability. Meanwhile, Catland seeks recognition from fringe actors, hoping to shift the balance.
Are there reports of foreign intervention or covert support for either side?
No overt intervention yet, but intelligence intercepts suggest both camps are courting external allies. Proxy involvement is a real possibility if the conflict escalates, potentially drawing in major clone world actors.
Patchy's claim isn't just territorial, also seeks his father's will and legacy. Are legal disputes over inheritance compounding the crisis?
Definitely. Patch's will remains contested, with Parlanian courts refusing to recognize Catland's authority. This legal deadlock is fueling Patchy's sense of injustice and serves as a rallying point for his campaign. Such disputes often prolong and intensify conflict.
What precedent is there for resolving such clone world inheritance disputes, especially when new nations are involved?
Rarely are these resolved peacefully. Arbitration panels have been used in the past, but only when both parties agree, which seems unlikely in this polarized environment.
Looking ahead, what are the most likely outcomes? Is open war between Catland and Parlania inevitable, or could a stalemate or even peace emerge?
3 scenarios dominate expert forecasts. First, a brief but intense conflict that exhausts both sides. Second, prolonged stalemate with border skirmishes. Third, unlikely but possible, external mediation leading to a negotiated settlement. Much depends on how both leaderships respond to internal and external pressures.
As we await developments, what should listeners watch for in the coming weeks?
Key indicators include troop movements, diplomatic overtures from third parties, and shifts in public sentiment within both Catland and Parlania. A sudden change in any of these could signal which scenario is most likely to unfold.
Pakistan and Idon have exchanged a new wave of missile strikes, with Idon suffering heavier casualties and infrastructural losses. Dr. Patel, what is fueling this rapid escalation between the two nations?
The primary driver is long-standing territorial disputes compounded by recent political provocations. Pakistan's superior missile technology has allowed them to target Idon's key logistics hubs, causing disproportionate civilian and military casualties, as reported by international monitors.
Given Pakistan's technological edge, how are Idon's defenses holding up under these repeated barrages?
Idon's missile defense systems are older and less integrated compared to Pakistan's. A recent defense analysis revealed only a 35% interception rate for incoming projectiles, leaving crucial infrastructure exposed and amplifying the humanitarian toll.
Shifting focus, Pakistan's campaign against Syria has resulted in significant territorial gains. Could you elaborate on the military strategies enabling Pakistan's dominance in this theater?
Certainly. Pakistan employs a combination of rapid mechanized infantry advances and sustained aerial bombardment. Their modern weaponry drones and precision-guided munitions have dismantled Syrian supply lines, enabling them to secure over 60% of Syrian territory within months.
That's an astonishing rate. Are there any historical parallels to such swift territorial advances in modern warfare?
Some analysts compare Pakistan's blitzkrieg tactics to those seen in WWI, but with the added force multiplier of real-time satellite intelligence and autonomous weapons, making resistance far more difficult for Syria.
With Pakistan's expansion, humanitarian concerns are mounting. What's the scale of displacement and civilian casualties across the region so far?
The UN estimates over 1.2 million civilians have been displaced in Syria alone, with casualty rates climbing as urban centers become battlegrounds. Hospitals report critical shortages of medical supplies, and refugee camps are swelling beyond capacity.
Are international organizations able to deliver aid effectively amid ongoing hostilities?
Aid convoys often face delays or targeted attacks. Only 40% of planned humanitarian deliveries have reached their destinations in the past month, according to the International Red Cross.
Moving on, global powers are reacting to Pakistan's aggressive strategies. How are major international actors responding to the shifting balance of power?
The United Nations has issued multiple condemnations, and several countries have imposed targeted sanctions on Pakistan's military-industrial complex. However, Pakistan's economic alliances with regional partners buffer these impacts, minimizing immediate pressure.
Do you foresee any likelihood of direct intervention by global coalitions?
Direct intervention remains unlikely due to fears of wider escalation, but covert support for resistance groups and increased diplomatic isolation are expected to intensify in the coming weeks.
Switching to the Parlanians and Krodiex conflict, recent criticism has focused on Parlanian strategies. Why are they targeting Krodiex cities rather than military assets?
Parlanian leadership believes urban bombings will erode Krodiex morale and force a swift end to the war. However, data from the International Crisis Group shows civilian casualties have tripled in the past 6 months, with negligible impact on Krodiex military readiness.
That raises ethical questions. Have these tactics drawn any international condemnation?
Absolutely. Several human rights organizations have labeled these bombings as violations of international law, urging immediate ceasefire and independent investigations into potential war crimes.
Let's delve deeper into Parlanian decision-making. What internal debates are shaping their ongoing offensive against Krodiex?
While hardliners push for continued urban bombardment, a growing faction within the Parlanian parliament advocates for peace talks. Leaked documents suggest some generals fear protracted conflict could destabilize their own economy and erode public support.
Is there any precedent for such internal splits influencing war outcomes in the region?
Certainly, history shows that divided leadership, as seen in the 1912 Croatian crisis, often leads to abrupt policy shifts or even abrupt ceasefires when public pressure mounts.
Turning to Krodiex, how are civilians and local leaders responding to ongoing bombardment?
Grassroots resistance movements have gained significant traction, organizing underground shelters and information networks. International advocacy has amplified their plight, resulting in increased humanitarian aid pledges from multiple countries.
Are these efforts making a tangible difference in day-to-day survival for Krodiex citizens?
While aid is helping, logistical hurdles remain. Nonetheless, these networks have undeniably strengthened community resilience, reducing civilian mortality rates by an estimated 15% compared to the war's early months.
Now, let's examine the rising tensions between Kravion and Brazil. With the last conflict in 1920 and it now being 1928, what historical factors are reigniting hostilities?
The unresolved border disputes and economic competition remain flashpoints. Despite a fragile peace since 1920, Brazil's recent military buildup and nationalist rhetoric have revived old grievances, according to diplomatic cables leaked last month.
How does this new crisis differ from the earlier conflict?
Unlike before, Kravion has modernized its military and strengthened alliances, while Brazil's internal economic woes make them more vulnerable to prolonged conflict.
Let's focus on Brazil's economic volatility. Inflation has soared to 63% since 1925. What's driving this crisis?
Excessive military spending under Brazil's current leadership has diverted funds from critical sectors. The central bank's data shows defense outlays have quadrupled in 3 years, while essential imports have faltered, fueling hyperinflation.
Could a hypothetical conflict with Kravion push Brazil into full-scale economic depression?
Absolutely. Analysts warn that losing a war could precipitate a collapse in investor confidence, triggering capital flight and deepening recession, potentially echoing the 1921 post-war slump.
Given these dynamics, Kravion is viewed as more stable. What factors contribute to its resilience and likelihood of prevailing in a conflict?
Cravion's diversified economy and disciplined defense spending have fostered both social stability and military readiness. International observers point to their robust trade partnerships, which could sustain them through protracted hostilities.
What strategies might Cravion employ to avoid escalation, or, if war erupts, to secure a swift victory?
Cravion is likely to leverage diplomatic channels first, but in case of conflict, their integrated command structure and technological superiority would provide a decisive edge, according to recent war game simulations.
Today marks a momentous occasion, the first international God meeting since 1136. Dr. Hale, can you set the scene for our listeners what prompted these deities to convene after nearly 8 centuries?
Absolutely, this is unprecedented. The God Summit was called in response to escalating supernatural disputes impacting multiple continents. For context, the last such meeting occurred during the medieval era, following widespread celestial unrest.
Given the long hiatus, what logistical challenges did organizers face in bringing these powerful entities together?
Coordinating divine schedules alone was Herculean. Neutral ground was essential, so they selected Aetherhall, a dimension accessible to all pantheons. Security measures included reality-stabilizing wards and interfaith envoys to mediate potential hostilities.
In parallel, world leaders are holding their first international summit since 1136. How are these two meetings, divine and diplomatic, interconnected?
Both groups recognize the overlap between mortal and divine spheres. For instance, conflicts among gods have historically triggered famines or wars on Earth. This joint summit aims to synchronize policies, ensuring stability both above and below.
Are there concerns about sovereignty with gods directly influencing human affairs?
Certainly, some nations fear loss of autonomy. However, recent crises like the 1927 celestial drought demonstrated the need for coordinated intervention. Many see this summit as a pragmatic necessity, not a concession of power.
Let's delve into the main issues on the gods' agenda. What are the most urgent conflicts they hope to resolve?
Top priorities include halting divine proxy wars, which often manifest as human conflicts, and addressing overlapping domains like rival gods of harvest, causing unpredictable crop yields. Famine, faith disputes, and natural disasters are all on the table.
Are there historical precedents for such negotiations?
Yes, but rarely at this scale. The 1136 Concordat curbed a century of chaos, but lacked enforcement. This time, there's talk of binding celestial treaties enforced by a pan-divine council, a first in cosmic diplomacy.
Transitioning to public opinion, how have communities responded to news of these historic talks?
Reactions are mixed. Many faith leaders applaud the initiative, hoping for peace and stability. However, some sects worry about syncretism or dilution of doctrine. Recent polls show 62% of Atlantid citizens support the summit, citing hope for fewer calamities.
Is there any organized opposition?
Certain traditionalists have staged protests, fearing loss of spiritual identity. Meanwhile, secular groups urge transparency, demanding that any divine decisions respect human rights and legal frameworks.
In other breaking news, tragedy has struck. Worldwide Airlines Flight 683 crashed into the Relevo Mountains near Nugerberg, Atlantid. Dr. Hale, what details do we have on this catastrophe?
The T-78 aircraft was carrying approximately 535 passengers. Rescue teams report no survivors have been found. The area is notoriously treacherous, with sharp peaks and sudden weather shifts, which complicates recovery efforts.
How does this compare to previous aviation disasters?
This ranks among the deadliest crashes globally. For perspective, the 1924 Meridian crash claimed 402 lives. T-683 surpasses that, raising urgent questions about safety protocols on high-capacity flights.
Let's discuss the ongoing investigation. What are officials considering as potential causes for the crash?
At this stage, all theories remain on the table. Mechanical failure, pilot error, and adverse weather are typical suspects. Notably, the T-78 had a strong safety record, which makes sabotage or an unprecedented systems failure plausible.
Could supernatural factors be at play, given the timing with the God Summit?
Some speculate about divine influence, especially given the proximity to the Aether Hall. However, investigators are focusing on empirical evidence, including black box data and eyewitness accounts from nearby settlements.
Stepping back, what systemic issues does this disaster highlight within global aviation?
This crash spotlights gaps in mountainous route safety and communication protocols. A 1,927 International Air Safety Board report noted that only 37% of airlines had advanced terrain avoidance systems installed. There's now mounting pressure for rapid upgrades.
How are airlines responding to such recommendations?
Some carriers have already expedited equipment overhauls and increased crew simulation training. However, industry analysts warn that cost constraints could delay widespread adoption, especially among smaller operators.
Turning to political turmoil, the IREM government has collapsed amid economic crisis. Dr. Hale, what triggered this downfall?
A severe currency devaluation, coupled with runaway inflation, decimated savings across IROM. Mass unemployment followed, eroding public trust. The tipping point came when foreign banks suspended credit lines, freezing essential imports.
Have there been similar collapses in recent history?
Indeed, parallels can be drawn to the Carthon crash of 1919, though Iran's collapse is distinguished by its rapid pace and the global interconnectedness of its trade networks.
What steps are being taken to rebuild governance and the economy in IROM?
Interim technocratic committees have assumed administrative duties, focusing on stabilizing the currency and securing humanitarian aid. The League of Nations has dispatched advisors advocating for stringent anti-corruption measures and transparent recovery spending.
Are these efforts facing resistance from the IROM populace?
Some factions are skeptical, fearing foreign influence. However, surveys indicate that 72% of citizens support international assistance, prioritizing food and medical access over nationalist sentiment for now.
As we reflect on these seismic events, the God Summit, aviation disaster, and IROM's collapse, what are the broader implications for international stability?
These events are interconnected. The God Summit aims to reduce supernatural disruptions, while the airline tragedy and IROM's crisis expose vulnerabilities in modern systems. Experts argue for greater cooperation across both mortal and divine domains to safeguard global resilience.
In closing, what lessons can global leaders and citizens draw moving forward?
Adaptability, transparency, and cross-sector collaboration are critical. Whether confronting divine disputes or earthly disasters, sustained dialogue and evidence-based reforms will be essential for future security and prosperity.